Welcome back to Loose Frame Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tyler Martin Olich, and joining me,
I'm Hillary Weber.
And I'm Brady Doyle.
good morning, ladies. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent today. I'm fully caffeinated,
There you go.
somewhat hydrated, but feeling pretty good.
There you go.
We have a really interesting guest today. It's going to get a little nerdy, a little tech heavy. Who are we interviewing, Hillary?
We are speaking with Gregg Perkins, who is a professor at the University of Tampa in their film program.
And we've already recorded the interview, so I know what's coming up, but we get into a lot of different things, not just in his background, but upcoming technologies, what they're focusing on, but also I thought a really interesting discussion of the differences in how both the students, but also the technology and the program itself at the University of Tampa has evolved. We're all college educated. We all graduated different time periods. Let's just go around. When did you graduate?
2021.
Hillary?
2011.
And I was 2003. So it goes back a ways. But just in that, I mean, let's just call it 20 years, right? Kind of a 20-year spread. The differences between now and then is kind of ridiculous. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that discussion and just the changes. Anything else you want to talk about before we start this episode?
I say we dive right in.
All right, let's do it. We'll be right back with our friend, Gregg Perkins. Welcome back to Loose Frame Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Martin Olich, and joining me now is filmmaker, artist, educator, and friend, Gregg Perkins. Hey, buddy, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
I appreciate it. I always like to start these things with just like the Reader's Digest, set the table, a little bit of background. So let's start there. Where were you originally from? And then we'll slowly peel that back and get to where you're at now here in Florida. But did you grow up always in Madison, Wisconsin?
I did from birth on. So I am, I guess, triply minted as a degree earner from the University of Wisconsin, as well as grew up in Madison. So grew up in the 1970s, listening to Paul McCartney and Wings on the radio in Madison, Wisconsin, green grassy suburbs. That turned into high school education there. And then along the way, I was a student athlete, both in high school and then was recruited to Wisconsin for track. So I started as a track athlete, triple jumper of all things, at the University of Wisconsin, and then realized that the athletics track was just not enough time to study, and so moved over to philosophy as undergrad. So I took an undergrad degree in philosophy at Wisconsin, and then soon thereafter moved to Minneapolis with a bunch of friends and started a couple of bands.
Yeah.
At that time, I think I was probably more of an aspiring writer, an artist, a generalist than musician, but I picked up the keyboard, played electronic keyboards, the Farfisa of all things, a Ray-Ban Zarek Styles Italian electric keyboard, and then realized quickly that the band dream, being in the land of Prince, we were not going to be Prince. We weren't even going to be like Ark Welder or Soul Asylum, and headed directly back to graduate school. At that point, I had been making a lot of films. I grew up in a pretty artistic family. My aunt is a trained photographer. My uncle's a painter. And so I had been around it as a child. And as much as my love of ideas sort of prevailed in undergrad, I think my true love was really like performance. I love being on stage, not only as a sort of performer, but also a musician, and went back to school at that time in 1999 at Madison for something called like non-static forms, which is now new media. It's what I teach at the University of Tampa predominantly. Quickly moved through graduate school, did both painting, very traditional, but also like video installation, music production, creating larger environments.
Is that like the Bruce Nauman era? Like what?
Precisely.
Okay.
Yep. That or Bill Viola, or there's so many other artists of that era that sort of worked in creating sort of room-sized installations, while keeping things grounded in both the art historical and the theoretical at the same time. After graduation at Wisconsin, I ended up teaching there both art history and, of all things, took over for a professor of mine who was a graduate professor in a program called InterArts and Technology at Wisconsin, which at that point was located within the dance program. So I taught early digital video to mostly dance students, but it was documentation and performance.
Yeah.
It was really nice to work with like choreographed performers because there's like nothing is out of place. It's perfect. But at that point, it was very mediated. So we would set up large screens and video project from the back. And this is when video editing systems, it was the Media 100. So it was about $100,000 for a desktop computer.
Yeah, that was the precursor to like your Final Drafts and your Premieres, or even Avid, really.
Right.
I think Media 100 was the first. In
Right.
fact, when I went to undergrad, that was what we started out on. That was I think I was sophomore when that came through.
Right.
And it's like, oh, we got this big clunky machine. No one knew how to use it. We just knew it was very expensive.
I was the guy in the lab, like figuring out how the Media 100 worked. So much so that I ended up picking up a job in the media center for the education school, creating educational materials as well. So one of the unique things about the graduate program at University of Wisconsin is it's situated within the education school. So what you have is at the same time excellent art education. You also are educated as an educator. And so I sort of ended up as a professor kind of by default, by very excellent training by my faculty and my peers there, which is, something I didn't really realize the value of until I got to the market of, education and realized I could really get in front of a class and teach. Kind of trial by fire. I took over for a faculty who was on sabbatical leave in Wisconsin and stepped directly in front of a room of 300 undergraduate students from my first class. Like I basically turned red, gave them the syllabus, and ran off stage.
But you'd been a performer at that point too.
I
You've been on stage and played
but
in front of audiences.
It wasn't about like talking about ideas.
You could sort of
like I could just play music,
disappear behind the keyboard.
Right. But quickly got used to being in front of big crowds. And it was fascinating, sort of learning that performance skill of teaching as well. It feels like you're also performing, right? In some respects, back to, I think my perpetual love of cinema and being on stage and performance in general.
Yeah. I did my tour of duty through the Midwest, living in Ohio and in Michigan for quite a while. Very dreary, very cold, very bleak, but I've always heard that Madison, Wisconsin was sort of this bastion of creativity. Was that true growing up? Was there just artists around you everywhere?
Yeah. I mean, when I was a child, this is the late Vietnam War era, right? I mean, there were still protests when I was a young kid. My mother worked on Library Mall and said she would often bring in students, hippies from, tear gas on Library Mall in Madison. So yeah, I grew up in an era of kind of like protest and creativity. Madison was at that point, not unlike Austin, Texas. What's the logo? What was the slogan in Texas? Keep Austin weird.
Keep Austin weird, yeah.
Yeah, Madison was like 39 square miles surrounded by reality. Which weirdly enough brings me back to my current Substack, which I'll discuss in a minute. It was really kind of a dreamy place to grow up. There were a lot of faculties, kids. So I was in the sandbox talking about infinity and astrophysics as a young kid. I mean, I think it was nice to be in such a, both a very safe and, suburban environment, but a very intellectual one at the same time.
Was there an art house cinema growing up in your community that was like, that's where I went, and that was the first movie you remember seeing there?
Yeah, I mean, what was nice is that even kind of like the AMC-like theaters would play like Lynch, and I remember seeing Blue Velvet in high school at like the local AMC, which I don't know if it would make it in.
Probably, I would know it wouldn't play anywhere.
But it was that. I mean, Eraserhead as well. I mean, both of those were like in the theater. I think that growing up in that kind of culture, I didn't really understand it until I got to UW, where when I started in '88 at UW-Madison, there were something like 50 independent cinema societies. So on any day of the week, you could go to like a lecture hall and see a film. So from my dorms on Lakeshore, which is kind of along the edge of one of the main lakes in Madison, there's a building that's still called Commerce, and literally the number of the room is B10 Commerce. I remember seeing like Thelonious Monk and Straight No Chaser on like a Tuesday as a sophomore or freshman on 16 millimeter with just a bunch of enthusiastic graduate students or undergrads like it was immersed in cinema. And I think it's interesting you ask, because I'd never really thought back about it, but that really did determine, like, I think a lot of my palette for extremely out there cinema. It was just sort of normal. Fast forward to being in Minneapolis and then coming back to Madison for grad school. I worked at the Orpheum Theater there for a time between graduating from graduate school. I was managing there. We were putting on both like large musical shows. It was like an 1,800 seat theater. So we would do large music shows like Cyndi Lauper and The Frayed and Feist. I mean, it was the era of those kinds of bands. Humphreys McGee. It was wild, quite frankly. But then at the same time, we would be like having the opening of David Lynch's Inland Empire. Yeah. Or, pre-screenings of Saw or Hostel. So we were really kind of always enthusiastic, but I think the culture was just like that's what you do.
So do you feel like you fell into education? You were always meant to go into that route? Or is there a part of you that's like, man, I wish I would have stayed behind the keyboard and see where that had gone, taken me?
It was interesting because we were sort of like taking stock of this as deals were either being made or not being made in Minneapolis. And really, we were extremely privileged to be sponsored by a studio at that point that had just recorded In Utero, or Nirvana's last record, named Pachyderm, which I made a film about. It's something you could view on my website, called Cannon Falls. It's in a small city south of Minneapolis. But I think being as close as we were, I mean, I met Little Steven at that time. He was doing solo records. What else was recorded there? Bob Mould, a number of fairly big 90s pop records were recorded at Pachyderm. And so the Breed, Kim and Kelly Deal would be running through that. Yes, I met a lot of people. Grant Hart from Husker Du. It was just like that was the culture. It was very much indie music. But you realize like a lot of people were still waiting tables.
Did you date one of the Dandy Warhols? Did I make that up in my head?
Sadie. Yeah, she dated Peter.
Okay, that's what it was.
Yes. That is true. That's a verified fact.
We've had many discussions over the years. Yeah. What a cool time to be growing up, though.
So, I mean, we knew the Dandy Warhols well. So it was a moment when I think the Portland, Minneapolis thing was very much wide open. There was like kind of the unspoken Highway 12 between the two. And I spent about a bunch of time in Portland, and we spent a lot of the time with those guys in Minneapolis. But, you realize like people were still like working in restaurants and being in famous bands as like some of Pavement were in New York. And I think I wanted something a little bit more stable. I'd worked in restaurants. I knew what that was really well. Yeah. And I thought it was time to sort of, solidify a little bit more straightforward and a little bit more stable life. I mean, it's just hard doing gigs like that. That said, I do have educators in my background. My uncle on my mom's side was the archivist and a historian at Northern Illinois University. My cousin on that side is now a professor. So, I mean, I think it was in the mix. My dad's mother was a teacher. So I think it's a little bit of both.
As someone who's gone through the educational system at the highest levels and has continued to be in the education system, going through undergraduate and grad school and working on your postdoctoral stuff, what was a takeaway that has served you well beyond just what you were learning, but just something as far as the critical application of teaching other people that you learned early on that you've continued to practice and implement today? Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things I've really always privileged is in many ways, this goes back to a studio model or an atelier model of painting where you have assistants who then become artists while working on things for you. Every film I've made has included students. And so to a large degree, like whatever I'm working on academically or theoretically ends up surfacing in the classroom. And I'm also testing out ideas in the classroom that end up getting, sort of filtered down into my writing and thinking. I think that's, again, the Substack I'll note a little earlier later called Be There Now is very much like a 20-year summation of a lot of the thinking that's come out of like really robust and interesting conversations with students who are, I started with millennials, we're now to Z, we're moving into alpha. Yeah. I've seen many generations at this point. And I think the transformation of those generations teaches the teachers as much as as they're being taught by anything, by any means. And that, to my mind, is super exciting because it's just a new take. I have a 8-year-old daughter, and that's another layer of teaching, and also just sort of like seeing someone come to come to light in the world that has transformed, dramatically since we were kids. Right?
Do you feel that there's been a shift in the types of students that are attending college these days, or is it still just grade 13, right? They don't know where else to go after high school, so now they go in. Where I feel like when we were younger, it was a privilege to go to college. You wanted to go there. You kind of knew what you wanted to do.
Right.
And how has that shifted in just all the years you've been teaching?
I just think because the availability of tech, I mean, first of all, you and I are in a very tech-specific field. Maybe writing less so, but I think even writing, you have to really understand the mechanics of cinema to understand how to write. I think like beginning with sort of the folks I knew going through high school and college, I knew people who have gone on to LA and written, who came from a very like dyed-in-the-wool humanities background, English majors.
Yeah.
And I think when I was an undergrad at Wisconsin, it was big enough that, I really wasn't. I knew students who were in the art program. I knew people that were in the astrophysics program. So it was, or engineering. I mean, it was a pretty comprehensive array of folks. And we all kind of went there being smart enough to get into school and then kind of like came to our disciplines as they sort of materialized for us. And there wasn't the pressure to sort of like specialize on the way in. Where I feel like maybe it's because cinema is something you really do need to choose to do. Like you don't stumble into it. Like you have to have sort of a good idea of what it is. We're getting students who are extremely well prepared. Their portfolios are just amazing. In the last 10 or 15 years, I'm shocked by how much students have already had their hands on cameras and really have made things that were remarkable.
I think that's an astute point. I think when I first started teaching, 15 years ago, there was such a need for those remedial classes just to be able to teach the programs, to teach the equipment. And I don't think that's the case anymore. These kids come in with better access to equipment than most universities actually have in their inventory. Yeah. And they're further along. So you can really start almost from day one talking about the substance and not the button pushing.
If anything, it's a little bit more like fundamentals, because coming to this as you do, as I see my daughter, like she has a 3D modeling program called Nomad. No, I'm not pitching it, but it's quite good on an iPad. She doesn't, there's no thinking about, there's no 3D design. It's just pure experimentation with the interface. And I think that's a really powerful tool to have, that kind of bravery to jump into anything and figure out what it does. And I think that kind of impulse is tremendous because you can put people in a context and they'll just pick up the software rapidly. But it is about like, okay, there are fundamentals of storytelling. There are fundamentals of like what drama, what 3-act is. And I think as AI starts to become more prevalent in how we automate parts of the industry and what we do, the fundamentals are going to matter more, right? And so ultimately, it's nice to get back and say like, well, wait a minute, let's talk about why. Number one, why are you telling this story? Do you have a personal relationship to it? Like, let's ground it in your experience, and then let's ground it in the fundamentals of like how we see ourselves in the world, in completely encircled with powerful technologies that will end up shaping the ways that we tell stories, but also like you still need good color theory. I love GPT, but it's not always, I mean, no offense. I don't want a robot overlord telling me this. It's not but at the same time, I mean, I think like there still is like a very human element that needs to sort of be governed and sort of, they're great assistants, but I think at the same time, like those principles have to be there in order to sort of be able to be most conversant in that conversation with an AI that's really powerful.
So let's fast forward a little bit. What brought you to Florida of all places? Was there a family connection? Or, I mean, I've never asked you this. Like, how did you end up here?
So what's interesting is at the time, this is 2000. I mean, I started a job search in 2005, 2006. I graduated from undergrad in 2003. Lived here in Chicago, and really like I'm coming back to my writing now with what I'm doing. But I wrote about art in Chicago for Time Out Chicago, New Art Examiner, which was it's literally the last review in the last issue. I mean, I was like kind of the angel of death for a couple of publications, admittedly at the beginning. I don't, I'm happy that it hasn't been the case for anything else. But that said, then was one of the first arts writers for Time Out Chicago. So my art history and my sort of philosophical background really brought me to writing for a year or two in Chicago, but then was teaching both art history and production, video, mostly video production, but some installation and performance classes at Madison, but then also taught briefly at the Art Institute of Chicago, was all the while looking for a full-time job. And I think one of the things you realize is that as an academic, as somebody who's out there with a very specific skill set, you are very much a journey person.
Mm-hmm.
You go to where the jobs are. And so really having sort of become more specialized in new media through much of my teaching at Wisconsin in the Inner Arts and Technology program, there were only a few posts per year in a new media kind of position. And so I was applying in part for sort of like hybrid painting, but that didn't quite fit. And ultimately, what I found was a position in new media in the communication program at UT. And I applied for that and ended up, strangely enough, like going to the CAA conference in New York. Like I was literally like on the runway. I got a call from the committee and all of a sudden I was in a Midtown Sheraton interviewing and ended up in Tampa just a few weeks later in March for an interview. And that was 2007. And I've been here since. So it was really about the availability of new media jobs at that point. Now, if you look at Creative Heads or Chronicle Prior Ad or CAA now, there are tons of new media jobs. I mean, they are one of the things that everybody's scrambling to cover because the industry is so hot. You can't get 3D modeling people because they're just getting soaked up by both the gaming and the 3D. Yeah, anything from virtual production to gaming.
So you came in at the ground floor of UT's sort of renaissance and a transition from. And this is going way back. My listeners are probably tuning out at this point, but like it started out within the communications department, and it was just a film concentration.
Yep.
I think I go back so far, like there was 3 people in the department, right? That was the entire thing, and then it slowly started transitioning to its own thing. Was eventually spun off into its own film and digital media. I think it was originally, and now it's film and multimedia.
Media arts. Now we have, where you have 3 BFAs in film animation, new media.
But when you started, I mean, we barely had a computer lab.
That's right.
It was
What was it?
Very anemic.
It was B10, I think, once again. But it was a lab with a couple of literally like pneumatic decks in it or something. It was pretty simple.
Beat up.
It's nice to have been there for the ride of all the growth at UT. I mean, you would not recognize the campus. From 2007 to today. It's completely transformed. And
I undersold you at the beginning. Like you are the chair of the program.
Yep.
And it rotates, but like you were one of the foundational people that transitioned from what it was to what it is now.
Yeah. And I think what happened, so I was tenured in 2013 and then immediately became the chair of communication and realized,
why did I do this?
Well, I mean, I think the world needs good arts administrators and good college administrators in general because it's a critical time in higher ed in a global context. I think, and ones who those of us who are conversant in the larger dialogue that's happening in all tech, and things are happening quickly, obviously. But it was nice to sort of, we saw there was this nascent film program that you graduated in 2003. So I was there, a good 4 years after, but slowly started building towards what we wanted to be a BFA. I mean, at that point it was a Bachelor's of Arts in Film and it was very general. We've built it out into, in 2016, 2017, we became our own, the 8th department in the College of Arts and Letters, and became our own program. And then within 2 years, we're accredited by the National Schools of Art and Design, which is really a feather in all of my colleagues' caps for the amount of hard work and just grit it took to just do the self-study and get through that with our colleagues in the art program. But that said, it's really brought us to a different level. A BFA, where I think the BA when you graduated was 56-ish, 52 to 56 credits out of 124 at the university. We're now at 78. So it's a professionalized degree. It's very much in line with National Schools of Art and Design accreditation standards, But that also means the students can go out and immediately make a feature.
Yeah.
They're exceedingly well technically trained, aesthetically trained. They've been DPs. They've shot a lot of things. And the beauty of this is that they're also working on like feature film sets due to Film Tampa Bay. Really, the relationship we've had has become much richer.
I appreciate the
because
club,
of it,
but or the plug, but the students themselves should take their own credit, and as much as more funding at the college level helps buy new equipment, fancier things. You get donations from big companies like the LED volume wall you guys have. But the quality of the students, both in terms of their academic prowess, but also their output of just consistently awesome shorts and documentaries, what do you attribute that to? Because it has been palpable. Every single year, it just gets better and better and better.
It's really fun going to the end of the year screenings because it's always like new fun things to watch. I think partially it's digital literacy on a basic level, but also we're growing like from your era to now. We've grown. We have a reputation. I mean, we've always chased the big schools. Granted, we're a very boutique program. We're not USC. We can't be Chapman. We just don't have the $500 million to build a building. But that said, I think what's really nice about it is that we're boutique. We're not huge. We're a very manageable sized department. But that means the students are really effectively getting more or less a master's degree. That's how we've always sort of framed it. And truthfully, they are able to go out and shoot features. They can work on features. Their ideas are robust. We've got the right faculty in place. But that, building culture doesn't happen overnight. And I've really personally taken stock in wanting to build a culture that's been very healthy and self-supporting and intellectual, as well as highly productive. You want faculty setting examples by making things and doing things. So, I think we're in a really good spot for that at the moment. We're excited about some of the new hires. We have a cinematographer coming in, Paul DeLumen, who is currently shooting John Travolta's first feature, which is like, if you asked me in 2007, was this ever going to be a reality?
Yeah.
I don't know if I
the directorial debut.
Yeah. No, his directorial debut, Paul's DP. Right. But I'm like, I don't really often stop to think about it, but that's really remarkable, right? In a relatively short span, in an academic context.
It's been a decade. That's it.
Right.
And from, let's say, 2013 to now, you couldn't recognize the department 10 years ago.
No. I think to a large degree, that's also about like a lot of hard work. And I mean, there's I often, when we do campus visits and so forth, I say to the parents and and the students, it's like, these faculty have been here for over 20 years. We're happy being here. We want to work with you. We found this culture and we want to keep it this way. So it's very much about all in and being dedicated to the task of it all. I mean, I think those of us who go into higher ed in general have a deep desire to want to give back the skills that we learned, and in some ways also do the things that we didn't get. Right? There's a degree to it's a little bit of revisionism on your own.
So what is your favorite thing after all these years about teaching? What gets you excited in the morning when you walk into the classroom?
I think the pure improvisation in a classroom setting. I mean, it's the stuff that my colleague and I published in the SIGGRAPH journal a couple years ago about group dynamics, the idea that, leave things open-ended and let's improvise. The beauty of having an LED volume is you can be anywhere almost instantaneously. And so it's like, oh, you want to shoot on Mars? Let's do that. Oh, Dr. Vaughn came in for the opening and said, I would love to see UT on the moon. We had a student stay up all night and model one of the minarets, and we put it on the moon. I mean, it's this beauty of like the open imagination and really allowing for that kind of improvisation as a larger group dynamic. It's something I discovered, and interestingly probably harkens back to being in bands, right? Or performing with others, and that there becomes almost like once you get, particularly in the virtual production class, once you get a class in groups to really recognize their roles, if there's a cinematographer or a digital lead or an LED volume operator or actors, it becomes this, it's about play, right? In some ways. And I think that's what great things can come out of that in terms of improvisational cinema. I think Sean Baker is really a master of that. And I'm a big fan of people who have championed that kind of realist, let's role play and just see where it goes and work with what we have.
So you mentioned earlier that, new media positions are everywhere. In
They
fact,
are.
you aren't a company that's going to survive for more than 5 years if you're not trying to hire those people right now in some capacity.
Right.
So where is the curriculum going? What are you sort of future-proofing your curriculum for?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the Sora is a game changer. I've been using it pretty much daily. If you're not familiar with it, it's OpenAI's video generator. It's extremely good. It does funny thing with human figures still, like heads will be facing
Or
the wrong way.
seven fingers for some reason.
Right, but it's less the case. And I think that's going to be, I think those bugs can be worked out with like one correction to an initial set of commands. So one of the courses that's coming online this spring is Imaging the Future, and it's how AI can be used for creativity. That's being taught by one of my colleagues. And then, I mean, with respect to virtual production, it was dumb luck, but also hard work and keeping an ear to the market of like, what's happening? Where do we need to be? And I think more so now so than ever, do faculty really have to be like, not back on their heels, but like in the market, working, seeing what's coming, because it's happening really rapidly. And I think even in terms of how the workforce is going to shift under the sort of appearance of AI is going to be dramatic, but it's also something that I think educators have to be aware of and be nimble and continue to train ahead of to some extent.
Yeah.
Be aware of it. I mean, it would be very difficult for me to be a history or an English professor at this point where you're trying to figure out, because both Gemini and GPT Pro 01 write excellent research papers. Okay, yes, it's not everything and they're not super, it's not comprehensive, but there's it's a great first pass for resources. And then
that actually
really
leads
speed
into my
things
next
up,
question.
right?
So, just technology, and certainly AI is so iterative. The difference between ChatGPT-1 and ChatGPT-4 is night and day, right? I mean, it's insane. So the next iteration is going to be even closer to replicating human thought, human speech patterns, human visualization. So what are you teaching the students that is not just giving them the tools to type in a prompt, but really make them an integral humanist element in the use of AI going forward, especially for art?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something I think about a lot. And in some ways, it's a conversation that's become, at least in my own mind, rife with reasons to sort of really write and think about this more carefully. But the advent of Willow in the beginning of November of 2020, it's not the advent, but really Willow's first major test. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it's Google's quantum computer that did basically a circuit sampling test in 5 minutes that would have taken like a classical Watson like supercomputer 10 septillion years.
Yeah. And NVIDIA's got their brand new chipsets coming out, which are the size of my hand, that can do the same computing power as Willow was doing, 3-4 years ago.
Right. And so in that, it's a $3,500 computer. Who wouldn't set up their own large language model? And it's fairly simple. I mean, you can follow some instructions. I mean, I've used it certainly creatively in many ways since GPT-3. I want to say, I was like, you get a number when I first signed up, and I was like number 14,000 something on that platform. So I was among the early researchers there, I dare say, or maybe I was 14,000 to GPT-3. But it was very much early trial, which I used to write. The Lucky at that point was very error prone. In fact, very absurdist, which I used very much to our advantage. I mean, The Lucky is very much a comical play about sort of the errors that are being thrown by this. Now you can't tell the difference. And I think that notion of verisimilitude between like a speaking app on your phone and a conversation with a human being or a chat agent, be that check your credit card balance, whatever. I think the Turing test has largely been passed at this point. And I maybe that's not completely true, but it's really hard to baffle them or get them into a loop, which I think is fabulous, but it also speaks to all kinds of things in Philip K. Dick, right? And replicants, and the idea that, what are the rights of AIs? And I mean, that stuff is really very real. But it also speaks to neuroscience and what we find sufficient as an agent in general, right? I mean, what counts as conscious. Even it can certainly fool us, and it's been the case.
There was a TED Talk not too long ago, and it was one of the engineers from Google's AI efforts, and they were talking about behind closed doors, it's doing things right now that they don't understand how it's doing it. Right? It's not just a math equation problem where it's like stack these 5 things correctly. It understands the concept of what an orange is and what a book is and how the weight would displace over it, and that's actually understanding the environment around you, which. How does it do it?
I think that's one of the things that a lot of neuroscientists sort of held off on and say, well, embodied cognition is different than AI.
Yeah.
Right. And the idea that like computing and robots and Boston Dynamics and everything they're doing would not get there is kind of a fallacy. It's just a matter of when.
And if it's not self-aware, then it's spatially aware at this point.
And they very much are. I mean, a Tesla can drive itself very well. I mean, and so, I mean, you have to welcome this world. We can't go backwards, right? And it's out of the box at this point. I mean, I think there's a remarkable book by Mustafa Suleiman, who was one of the authors. He's one of the DeepMind founders, and is now, I want to say his company's called Inflection AI, who wrote a book called The Coming Wave, and it's 2023. It's a fabulous read. It's worth it. I think it's really the playing field of what we're all looking at. But even in 2021, 2022, AlphaFold and then AlphaGo did that very thing.
Yeah.
I think in Go, it was playing Go against the world champion, and in move 37 or something, it made a move that was just completely confounding and baffling, not logical, had never been seen before, but ended up dominating the game after that because it's using its own way of thinking about it or processing. It's no longer human logic, right? And I think that's both probably super dangerous, and really intriguing at the same time.
So do you how do I phrase this? Do you feel threatened? My girlfriend teaches at the high school level, and there's such a premium on using AI to help just write curriculum and answer questions and develop tests to the point where it will not only give you a lesson plan, it'll generate a full PowerPoint presentation with videos and everything else you need. And do you feel like, I mean, God forbid, I don't want tenure ever to go away, but do you see as tenure professors slowly retire or get knocked off that AI is going to somehow come in and start educating us? I
think what the pandemic proved to a lot of us was that, and also there were studies in, early studies in large, massive online classes, MOOCs, I want to say they're called. UC Santa Barbara published a study that, really when people are just introduced to the information, they don't learn as well, right? I think we're still kind of stuck in our human biological evolution.
It's our own limitations.
Right. That we still need, I don't know if a screen is enough. Yeah. Now, if I could sit and talk to a robot ad infinitum about astrophysics, I don't know if at some point like it stops mattering.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think a lot of us in academia felt that in general, because at the same time, like with edX and like what MIT is doing online during the pandemic, it's like, well, you could have Spike Jones teach you, like masterclass, teach you a class on screenwriting. Why would you study with Gregg Perkins or Tyler Martin or whomever, And I think part of it's about like the embodied experience of being in a classroom, making things with other people, collaborating. I think that part of it, the kinetic, physical part of learning and being on a campus, is something we can't just shed. I mean, I would like to think you could just by osmosis absorb all this information. Some people can, but I think by and large, people still need to be in a sort of setting where there's others and dialogue, and also very much human concerns come into this, and it's not always academic. As you know, college is so often about so much else, and the ideas and the productions that they're making.
So let's transition. You do a lot of experimental work outside of the classroom. So what are you working on right now?
Okay, so the film that was written with GPT-3 called The Lucky has just sort of finished its festival circuit. It did well. It was the Portland Festival of Animation and New Media. It was nominated for Best Unreal Engine Film. It was shot on View's Stage 1 in 2021, I want to say. It was deep pandemic. When I look at those images, we're all wearing masks. That forgettable time. It seems like so long ago. And it took forever to edit it because I had 10 students shoot it. They had their own choices. And then I used an algorithm to edit the film. So I didn't have a whole lot of choice of it. It was very much an experiment in chance, not only by having GPT-3 write it, but then also, so that's kind of in the wake. There's a piece that I showed at a university faculty show called The Forest that I don't think has received enough attention. It's very much a gallery multi projection, which I am kind of finishing once and for all as a test when we showed it at UT, that I'd like to deploy in like a larger museum or gallery context. And then the other thing that's really occurred to me is that, you have a 24-hour access to a VR stage and a virtual production stage. And, when I talk to everybody, they're like, there's a lot of short films in the market. You should make a feature. And so really the beginnings of the idea for a feature film shot in a single location with backgrounds and probably a very limited cast is starting to come to light. And I think it's going to include a lot of improvisation, both on the digital side and also like it'll almost be a performance that ends up becoming a feature. As it's documented, it'll seem like a narrative feature. That's beginning, and then I'm working on a Substack, which I launched recently here, late 2024, early 2025, which will now in May. Happy spring, everyone. I will be probably in fairly in great swing. Is really it's called Be There Now. It's based on Ram Dass's Be Here Now, the book that was one of the seminal texts about mindfulness, somebody who dropped out of Harvard and became a mindfulness meditator and real leader in the mindfulness community, kind of by and large, brought a lot of Hindu and Buddhist thinking to America in the 1970s, very much in line with a lot of when the Beatles were experiencing this stuff as well. But it's Be There Now, and it's very much about narrative and virtual reality, and like it's in a cursory way, it sort of attempts to describe where is there in a narrative. We're reading a book on a page, but we're also in the story. We're now immersed in a VR experience. Where are we? Where is that becoming real? And so that'll feature both practitioners, screenwriters, engineers, neuroscientists, and probably physicists at some point. I think my research is pretty broad because, interestingly enough, when you see Willow do something that would take 10 septillion years, the physicists are saying, well, that proves that there's a multiverse, right? And so in weird ways, like technology is now linked with physics, and creativity has to sort of find itself in that world, which is a really strange and beautiful place, I think. And there's a lot to investigate. But I'm beginning with first principles. So the post here in early January is on Plato, on Aristotle's Poetics. I'm starting at the beginning. I haven't read these texts since undergrad, and I'm going back and moving through all the classic texts just to really sort of create a foundations again, for what I think we're seeing today. So it's an attempt to sort of do both things, work in the present and also go back to the roots of this, sort of storytelling in general.
Where are you going next? I mean, looking into the future, both in terms of your own experimentation, but also in the classroom, like what are you excited to teach next semester and the semester after that?
So I teach both the sound production course and also, it's basically Unreal Engine based courses. So it's a game engine one way or the other. In some cases, it's about modeling the real. So this last semester, it's called spatial computing. So it's essentially like creating one-to-one relationships between the digital world and the real world in terms of digital twins and so forth, and really teaching students the sort of importance of scale, right, in that sense. And then in the spring, I'm teaching virtual production, and we are bringing in all kinds of music videos. We're shooting commercials. We're working a lot of work that's sort of production for bands, for artists and so forth. In a lot of ways, just getting students to really understand the process by doing hands-on. I think that's forever going to be part of it. There is probably some literature out there, but I think there's a lot more to be said and done in terms of like there's the grammar of cinema, right? We can talk about a cowboy shot or a full or a opening shot or a master. In virtual production, depending on where you're at, you have to work with a lot closer cameras oftentimes, unless you've got a lot of budget to be able to put floors down and so forth. So I think the grammar of virtual production is something that needs a little bit more discovery. And I think there's just a lot of interestingly enough, study of old school visual effects that are coming back into meaningful place inside of virtual production. The use of fog, the use of real props, the use of trampolines, the use of under desk treadmills and so forth to create the illusion of the real. So interestingly, I never thought of myself as like being in the VFX industry. I am like slowly, I think I've kind of had one foot in it for a long time, sort of doing video projection, but now it's a whole
that's so
different
interesting because
layer,
you're right. You have to somehow extend the foreground because you're in a very limited space.
So this whole thing has become really common. It's like I am kind of in VFX at this point, and I never thought of myself. But at that point, I mean, it's I think to that point, a lot of what I thought about and read about and taught in terms of like cinematic and realism in text and realism in painting, even back to Courbet and the French painters, was about like, what does it mean to represent the real? What are the devices it takes to represent the real? What is the subject matter that signifies as in, Italian neorealism or New American realism, a la mumblecore and so forth, right? And I think that those cultural things will also be something that I think I'm really interested in experimenting with groups of students to create like our own very like Dogma 95 kind of personal vernacular of virtual production. That's our own thing. And I think we're only really at the trailhead of that. And that's exciting. The students are starting to use it for dance performances and like real-time video recording with them in front of the screen, which is creating these like really wild like image lags and this sort of tiling feature. So I think like the experimentation is finally coming in. It's not the scary monolith that you sort of turn on. It's like, no, that's just a big monitor that has really special capabilities, when you plug it into Unreal, but it can be used for so many other things. So, interestingly enough, we're like rigging, it takes like cinematography tools, like having Warren climb up and mount a camera to the ceiling and be shooting overhead. So in many ways, like practical VFX had become more important in an interesting way in the VR world. And I think that to me is super refreshing because I haven't honestly done a very comprehensive study of like old school cutout VFX with like distance and miniatures and so forth. It's fun to look at that stuff, to be honest, from Millet on,
We're coming to the end of the podcast here, Gregg. I want to give an opportunity to give UT a shout out. And also any personal spaces you might want to clue people in on. So where can people find more about the FMX program and where can people find more about you?
Okay. Number one, you can go to just type in film animation new media at the University of Tampa website. We've got a really rich website. There's all kinds of things there to look at. We have something called Sunshine Cinema, which we have put on with our partner organization, Sunscreen Film Festival, which we've been doing workshops. The most recent of which, late fall, was a stunt workshop, which was kind of amazing because people were literally flying around with wires on and so forth. I mean, it was incredible. So there's a lot to be learned from those. Those are open to the public. I hope everybody pays attention to those. I would encourage you to get on. You can write Destiny Greer at ut.edu, dgreer@ut.edu. To be put on our mailing list, but also I would put yourself on the Sunscreen mailing list. It's something that, Tony's really good about getting that word out.
The classes are fantastic.
They're fun.
They're honest and unvarnished. It's great to hear some oddball questions from the audience, and then they just feel completely compelled to answer it in real time, no matter what the question is. It just feels very unscripted, but very informative.
Super informative about film financing. It was remarkable. It's like Tony's up there like, make your own feature. I'm like, why am I not making my own feature? I mean, even though I've been doing this all, it's really kind of remarkable to have somebody come in and give you an assignment. Those are fun, and that's a great community to join. I mean, those people, you'll find them at the opening of Sunscreen Film Festival, the opening, the parties at Gasparilla International Film Festival. And it's a community to really be a part of. I think that's something we cherish here, and as a department, we really want to continue to build. We are doing some screenings on campus. So there's also a Sunshine Cinema screening series, which is UT faculty work. You can, again, like we can get you on a mailing list. If you just write to Destiny Greer or myself, Gregg Perkins at ut.edu, we can get you on a mailing list for those upcoming things. It's faculty discussing their own work and then screening a feature or shorts by themselves. This will be a little bit too late, but please just at least look for TampaAnimationFestival.com. We are rebooting a festival that happened in 2018 and then was derailed on its 2-year rotations because COVID. We're finally quickly rebooting it in the spring. But that said, it's here to stay. I think probably every year. It'll be limited, but I think it's something that has been a really great resource and was really started because we were growing a BFA in animation. Obviously, there's my website, greggperkins.com, and then also my Substack, which is called Be There Now. I think if you just look up Be There Now, Gregg Perkins, you'll find it. It should be a fun ride, and I'm really hoping for a lot of like reader and user conversation there. I mean, this is an open conversation. I think that the beauty of Substack is that these are real open discussions, and you can have remarkable discussions with people from George Saunders, who is a tremendous author, to Miranda July, to all kinds of tremendous filmmakers and artists. So it's a place to be, and I think it's a place to sign up and really pay attention. It's a highly informed social media network, that's for certain.
Well, I appreciate you, sir. Thank you for taking the time with us this morning.
Thank you, Tyler, for all the permits you write for our students, all hundreds.
That's Hillary off camera here. But we really appreciate our collaboration with UT. I was alumni there. I've tried to give back, and it's just been so great to see the evolution of not only the department, but the talent of the students year after year. And that's a tribute not only to the students' creativity, but also the amazing faculty you guys have over there.
It's true. It's true. And we cherish everything you guys do for us. It's a big deal.
We appreciate that.
Well, I mean, it's a culture that needs to be nourished. And
it's a collaborative environment, and we all rise with the tide, as they say. So with that, we'll be right back. And welcome back. That was a great discussion, ladies. I had a ton of fun. I've known Gregg since he moved here in 2007. He's been not only a friend, but a person of support, linking the Film Commission with UT. We have a great collaborative relationship with the students, always trying to get them on film sets. We underwrite a scholarship for them every year. But they've been really helpful just also in plugging filmmakers into the department and getting access to a beautiful campus as a location. But it was really interesting just to talk to him, not only about education, but his own background, some futurist technologies coming online or stuff that he's interested in right now. What was some of the things that just stood out for you that he was exploring or was of interest?
I was really interested in his ideas about AI, specifically as a filmmaker and a film professor, and about what he thinks the role of AI might be in the future. I am still sort of figuring out personally how I feel about the application of AI in film. I think it is misused a lot, but then last year at Sundance, I saw Eno, which was the Brian Eno documentary, where it doesn't have AI generated components, but they did write an AI script, so it changes up the editing of the film so that every time you see the film, you're watching a different version of the movie. And I thought that was like a really unique way to explore using AI.
That's interesting. So did they film multiple variants and then it just sort of reshuffles and slots them, or is it generating a new outcome every time?
It's generating a new outcome every single time. They built different scenes, and then within the different scenes, they had different sort of paths that they could take, and the script totally reconfigures things. And I've seen it twice now. And so you end up having the same scene in different places. But what does that mean for the arc of the film if you have something that in one version is being used to sort of generate things, but in another version of the story?
And was it subtle or very dramatic, the changes?
I thought it was kind of subtle. I mean, it was just really interesting to know that you're going on this different journey every time you see it. And at the beginning of the film, they put a little like timestamp, and it tells you where the screening is and what the date is. I'm not sure for streaming and DVD what that would look like, but at least for the in-person experience, it was pretty cool.
Didn't Black Mirror try that a couple of years ago? It wasn't iterative like that, but it was like a pick your own adventure, and they had, it was probably only 10 or 12 different variants, but you could actually do binary choices in almost every scene.
Using your remote.
Like the choose your own adventure books.
Yeah, but live on Netflix. It was very interesting. I don't know if that experiment ever went anywhere. I think it was just kind of a one-off, and people were like, maybe not.
Well,
I'm fascinated by this conversation now.
I was going to say, let's just make the outro about this movie.
No. We'll get to Gregg in here in a second, but because I haven't seen this. Was it enjoyable because of the gimmick, or of interest because of the gimmick, or if you didn't know that going in, would it still have held up?
That is a really good question. I think for me, I definitely was interested in like the gimmick of it. I think at least the versions that I saw, they still held up really well as a film. I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, this scene got shoved in here and it didn't really make sense. It's much more of a, if we're going with the whole be here now thing, like being in the moment with the film versus like having it be so straightforward. So it was really cool. It was a unique experience.
That's fascinating. I also really enjoyed him pointing out just the need of practical effects now to complement virtual backgrounds. They have an LED volume wall at the University of Tampa that was donated by View Technologies, which is a pioneer in that industry. Beautiful soundstage they have over there now at UT. But you're right, it's a limited palette, right? It's what you can create on the screen. But if you're trying to move away from that and really give some depth, you need to augment that with practical effects.
Well, that's something that's changed in the time since I've been there. I graduated 2021, and they got that, I think, around that time anyway. So the way that I learned, how to make things, video production, so different than they are now.
They always get the cool stuff a
year after
right after you leave.
right?
It never fails.
Tell me about it.
We were talking about the Media 100, which was one of the first digital editing tools that came out. In fact, if not the first. And it was a behemoth, right? I mean, this was not just a software update or something you plug in. It was a full-on computer rack with multiple server blades that was trying to run this thing. It was massive. It was huge. It cost tens of thousands of dollars, something that a student couldn't afford. And in fact, the university only was able to afford one of them. So we had to like really schedule our time to be able to use that. And if we didn't manage our time correctly, like, sorry, next student has to come in and use the same computer. But we were talking about offline. The year we got that, I think it was my junior year. But we had to get external hard drives to run it, and I had to pay $2,000 for a 1 gigabyte Lacy drive, which just blew my mind at the time.
Wild. Mercy.
So let's talk about little differences here. So you said 2001.
2021.
2021 was when you graduated. So what was the program like at that time?
It was, and I really don't have anything to compare it to now. It was production and it was theory. So you could, and there wasn't a one track or another. We were asked to take production and theory, but you had kind of the option. So I found myself shying away from production classes and really diving into genres, color theory, directors, trademarks, things like that. So it was cut and dry. It feels like, but I can't compare that to anything.
Of your graduating class, is there anyone that's out there making movies right now that you're aware of?
We have, yes, actually. So Destiny Greer was mentioned a couple times in the interview. She was in my class. And then there are people that I know I recognized on the Feather Detective set and on some of these commercials that we do small set visits to, or not commercials, I guess. But we have, it's like maybe 50-50, I'd say. We have a lot of cops for some reason. UT's film department was kind of a funnel to law enforcement.
Okay.
I didn't know that was a thing, but yeah.
I don't think that's the endorsement they're looking
that's
for.
A side note. But yeah, it's like 50-50, and a lot of them are local. I think the other 50% left town. Yeah. So
when I graduated, I was a class of 3. And of the 3, I'm the only one that still is working in film and digital media in any capacity. Wow. One went into college entrance. Something. What was he doing? He grades college entrance applications, essentially.
That's interesting.
And the other one, I think, got married and decided to be a ski instructor. As far as I know, that's what she's still doing. Hillary, after I graduated, I went on to go to SCAD. You graduated from SCAD. What was that program like?
Oh my gosh, it was amazing. I think the most unique thing about the time that I was in college is that it was sort of the death of analog and then the real rise of digital. So when I was in high school, I trained in darkroom photography, and then I was the last SCAD class to actually shoot with film. Everybody after me only learned digital film. I was the last class.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Were they using CP16s, or it was the?
Oh my God, I don't even remember.
They had a Panavision when I was there. That was a 35 millimeter. They only had one.
I mean, I remember we were pulling out like Bolexes and stuff in intro to film. I don't know that we even, by the time I got into like lighting and field and those classes, it was completely digital by that point, and they were using like the reds and stuff like that.
That's cool.
It was amazing to have that technology available. I always felt like there were amazing resources, whether it was editing equipment or cameras, things like that. Just the facilities were top notch. And I'm really grateful to have studied with the professors that I did. And I can tell he seems like he would have been a fun professor to have had a class with. I still think very fondly of all of my professors. So I had a good time there.
I had Perkins, and he was a good professor. He was fun.
Yes. He always knows what's new and interesting and out there. So fascinating conversations.
Yeah, well, he was talking about, the being in the classroom and the teamwork and everything, and it was bringing me right back, because it was not just, okay, here's my presentation, here's my lecture, here's your assignment. It was like, what are we doing today?
I did appreciate him talking about how his own outside interests end up filtering into the classroom, and then how he starts experimenting with whatever he was looking into with the students. It becomes a collaboration. I felt like the same thing happened at UT. At SCAD when we were there. I had professors that were actively working on projects, and all of a sudden we would be working on those projects as well. We were doing an editing project with BJ Sears. It was the same time, rest in peace, he passed away a couple years ago, but he was doing a feature with Walter Murch at the time. It was Jarhead, and we were getting dailies in our class,
really cool.
and getting to edit those alongside of him. And it was experimentation where he would show us at the end of a class where he was at with that scene, and then we would show ours. And I have to imagine some of our edits, not ours specifically, but our edits, when he saw them, he's like, ooh, that might work better, right? And it ultimately had an influence on the final outcome. So
when I was in when I was in his class, he had been working on Kings, which had been canceled, and it was a show that I had loved. So then I ended up in his classroom, and then I got to see all the dailies, all of this footage for this show that like had ended, and I craved more of. And so it was so cool to be able to actually work on.
Was he still using the footage from Amadeus?
No. Do you remember that Western film?
The who killed? What was it? I don't remember.
I don't remember what it was, but that's what it was, and I think it's been that
ever since. So
that's so
he
interesting.
He won an Academy Award. Well, he didn't, but Walter Murch did for the sound editing for Amadeus. Amadeus, amazing film, but he had all of the unused footage from the film, so we would get the full raw footage from scenes, and then we could pick how it actually operated. And the difference is Milos Forman was the director on that, and he would change up every single take. He would have extensive notes. Do this, try that, hold longer here. So it wasn't like little variances. It was completely different scenes that had completely different tonal shifts, and being able to edit that, but in a classroom, I don't want to say a competitive environment, but everyone wanted to really shine, right? And everyone's take was completely different because of that. It was really cool environment.
Oh, that is cool.
And then you learn a little bit more about the flexibility you can have on set and different techniques that you can use as a director. So it goes way beyond just like sitting there and editing. And
so it was a very cool experience. I certainly enjoyed my time at UT, but SCAD was also. I was further in my career when I went to SCAD too, so that was for grad school, so I was a little more prepared. But the students at UT now, the advantages they have that didn't exist when I was there, and I mentioned the quality of the students, and you've judged, Hillary, every year almost going back 5 years, the student showcase
for the Black Box Film Festival, since I think 2019.
Yeah, and it's gotten better every single year, which is really exciting. I asked Bertie this, but was there anyone from your class at SCAD that has gone on to do awesome and amazing things?
Yes, there are a few people in my class that work in film, and one of them, directed an HBO documentary, but it was because his mother had been murdered, and so I would rather have my mom.
Yeah.
So like it's not like a competitive thing. I feel like he had a very compelling and sad story that led to that. Also very talented, but that's the only one who's directing right now. Huh.
Well, I'd like to say, I'd like to say I only graduated like 4 years ago, so I think my people are still. We'll see where they end up.
Where they're going. Yeah, that's fair.
Not so established.
I was trying to think of who from my class has gone on to do things. A lot of digital effects people were in my graduate class. A lot of people have gone on to work on things like Andor or Avatar. I had a bunch of people. Had a couple of really good ADs that are actually working out there in Hollywood right now still. I don't remember anyone directing that graduated. Well, that's not true. There was quite a few that went on to do really big stuff in commercials, but nothing feature-wise or TV-wise I can think of. So
I know a lot of people that are working in production design. I had a former colleague who designed the halftime show for the Super Bowl, won an Emmy for that. So there's a lot of competition from my year. I need to step up my game a little bit.
You're doing just fine. You have a paycheck coming in. There are a lot of people who ended up at Starbucks and they're still.
Yeah.
So
Hey, in Florida,
nothing wrong with that, by the way. But
in
that was
Florida,
probably
a full-time
trajectory.
film job is a really, really big deal. So I'm very
right now,
lucky.
very much so. Yes.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that I mean, just the AI stuff was fascinating.
The AI
where it's
stuff,
going.
the VR and AR stuff being included in the curriculum, I thought was interesting, and the conversation about if he feels threatened, and the answer is no, which I feel like over the last couple of years has kind of been the general answer. Has been, yeah, that could screw up my job or what I do, but ultimately they can't do what I do.
And I hear what he's saying, but I do have fears there because of the iterative nature, which I mentioned. It's like it just gets better and better and better and better. And there's a point where it's not going to be distinguishable anymore as far as the frontward facing, you type in a prompt, here's what comes up. Now, it's true. An AI will never know what it's like to lose a mother and be inspired to do a documentary about that loss. It just can't do
The
that.
careers will change, right? The jobs that we're holding now are not us, but it'll just pivot to a different role.
Yeah. With the time we're filming this, Alien Romulus just dropped on streaming, and it's been a big thing right now. Who was the director of that? Fede Alvarez. So they brought back John Hurt in his role digitally. Now, what we did, Ian Holm, sorry, geez. Thank you. Ian Holm digitally.
No wonder that sounded.
John Hurt. Sorry. It was Ian Holm digitally. Bilbo Baggins, for those who don't know. But he had passed away years ago, right?
Yeah.
But they brought him back not only to life, but de-aged him. What we didn't realize is that they also made a actual animatronic puppet of him that looked fabulous.
That's crazy.
And they didn't have time. They were rushed. So for the theatrical release, they inserted a digitally mapped face that AI helped create, and it looks terrible. But for
It's like nightmare
he
stuff.
hated it, and the responses were really bad. So for the actual streaming version of it, he went back and convinced the studio, like, we have this animatronic puppet. It's flawless. It just wasn't lit right because we were moving so quickly. So let us go back in digitally now, relight it, and it looks fantastic. So hard effects at this point are still trumping a lot of digital effects.
That's interesting.
Have any of you seen the new Zemeckis film? He relied a lot on AI. Again, it has Tom Hanks and
where they're in the same room.
Yeah, and so it's, again, kind of like, they're not necessarily like generating AI content, but they're using AI programs. And so they would film Tom and Robin live on set using their first names because I clearly am so close with them. And then they would have this program in real time do this de-aging. And so they were able to see that on set as they were going and work with it that way.
Was it Uncanny Valley? I haven't seen the movie.
I haven't seen it yet. I'm really curious to know how well it works.
Zemeckis every couple of years tries doing something crazy with whatever the latest technology is. Like famously he did Polar Express, which is just nightmare fuel.
Are we sure it's not Tom Hanks leading all this?
Maybe it is Tom Hanks. That's the problem.
He wants to work forever.
But I remember the Irishman was awful. I don't mean the movie. I mean the de-aging was it just did not look right. It looked like Play-Doh faces.
Has there been a situation where it hasn't had that reception?
That's why I was curious about this movie, because Leia was not.
Leia was not. There was some reception
when they
on that.
had who played Admiral Tarkin.
I don't know the name.
My brain is mush these days. Anyway, they've tried bringing back people before, and it just doesn't work. The Blade Runner 2029 or 2049. They brought back again. What's her name?
I
This
don't know. I wish
discussion's
I could,
derailed.
like, I wish I could see in your
That's
mind
what I
right
need
now.
AI for, is just to
Just like a chip in your
dig
head.
through my brain and find that one compartment
It's
that
just
has
an
that actor's name.
IMDb database.
That's all I
It's
really
the whole
need.
database right there.
Names and faces and just, life in
Very
general.
helpful.
Maybe
Yeah.
that's where the Google Glass would come in, just
Yeah.
for that kind of thing.
Listen to it. I guarantee I'm going to pick up my phone later and turn on Facebook, and those actors are just
So
going
and
to appear.
so, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
Ads for Google Glass.
It's gonna be, yeah, my bad, guys. I'm sorry.
Anyway, we need to wrap this up. Any final thoughts? Are you glad you went to college?
100%.
Yes. What kind of question is that?
I don't know. I'm just asking.
I'm glad I went
Yeah.
to UT. I found it to be an intimate program, which Greg mentions was for the better. Everyone got a lot more attention.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, I've had interns before from UT. They're incredible. We've had interns from UT. They're incredible. And the black box is incredible.
Yeah, you can't even call it the black box now. I mean, it's a full LED volume studio. So.
I meant the Black Box Film Festival.
Oh, the Black Box
My
Festival.
bad.
Sorry, I mentioned the space.
Yeah, I have
on
no
campus.
idea what's going on with the space.
Apparently, I only hire people from either SCAD or UT. So clearly, I appreciate
There you go.
their training and the
Well,
education
it's like
you get
right
there. And it's also
So
true.
it's pretty easy to commute.
Well, yes. All right. Well, with that, let's wrap things up. Where can they learn more about us?
We are Loose Framing Podcast. You can stream us anywhere you stream podcasts, and you can watch us on YouTube.
And with that, we'll see you next time.